Welcome listeners and viewers far and wide from Barcelona to the Bowery. I'm Eirik Gislason, Associate Broker and Team Leader of the Excelsior team at Brown Harris Stevens, Master Certified Negotiation Expert and Instructor, founder of Archway Partners Coaching, and your host of Shear Line Negotiation Mastery, the podcast bound and determined to reclaim and restore the good name of negotiation and unlock the door to value creation, win-win solutions, and the true power of integrative negotiation. Now, buckle up everybody today because we're going to focus on competition and rivalry, and we've got the perfect guest to do so. As today's guest on Shear Line writes, competition is a fact of life. Employees compete for promotions, groups of researchers vie for grants, and companies fight for market share. Typically associated with competition is the drive to win or defeat one's opponent. But as our guest also points out, not all competitors are the same. Some opponents bring out in us a higher level of focus, effort, and intensity. They make us better. They make us work harder to achieve. They motivate us. Think Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, Coke and Pepsi, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. And other rivalries bring out more negative aspects of competition, such as ego-driven decision-making, emotional escalation, unnecessary risk-taking, a breakdown of trust and collaboration, and a shift from creating value for the client to simply trying to beat the other side. In other words, they don't just make us want to win, they make us want to beat them. It's built through close contests, near wins and losses, frustrations, and experiences that don't just disappear when the deal or the game is done. They stay with us. They create what our guest's research describes as a competitive residue. And that residue shows up in the next negotiation or game. It shows up in how we prepare, how we listen, the assumptions we make, the positions we take, our level of focus, and the decisions we justify. So the goal of today's conversation is not to degrade competition, because competition is good, and it's not to minimize the power of a good rivalry. The goal is to understand it, to recognize when a rivalry is present, to see how it influences our behavior, and to learn how to harness the upside without falling into the traps that come with it. Because if we can do that, we give ourselves a real advantage, not just in the deal we're doing right now, but in every deal that follows. So with that, we'll take a break and we'll come back and meet our special guest, Professor Gavin Kilduff, after a word from our sponsors.
Looking to stage a property but on a tight budget and timeline? Stage with Stage and Fold. Stylish, lightweight, foldable, 3D printed cardboard furniture that looks real. Quick delivery and easy assembly. Staging starts at just $199 a month per room, and setup takes less than 30 minutes. Contact us today to stage smarter, sell faster, save thousands with Stage and Fold.
From residential and commercial closings to litigation, Romer DeBoss is your full-service real estate law firm. We blend big firm knowledge with boutique-level attention, delivering outcomes that exceed every expectation. Contact us at romerdeboss.com.
Welcome back. Now, Gavin Kilduff is a professor of management at the NYU Stern School of Business. He teaches courses in negotiation and organizational behavior and researches the topics of rivalry and competition, status dynamics and social intelligence, and play. Specifically, he examines how rivalries develop among individuals, groups, and organizations, and how they affect competitive behavior and decision-making, how individuals and groups navigate status hierarchies within organizations, and how engaging in non-serious play can benefit individuals, teams, and organizations. He's written op-eds for the Wall Street Journal and Harvard Business Review, and his work has been featured in various media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, Time, Scientific American, and ESPN. Gavin received his bachelor's in computer science from Penn State University and his PhD in business administration from the University of California, Berkeley. In his spare time, he enjoys live music, running, climbing, hiking, and traveling. Professor Kilduff, I'm so thrilled to have you on Shear Line, so welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yeah, I wanted to share with our audience, because you and I are just meeting today, And oftentimes I'll go into this deep dive and research into negotiation. It drives my passion. It's everything that I love to do. And I happen to be doing a deep dive into competition, which led me to Rivalry. And so among all of my searches that I was doing, I put in a search into ChatGPT, and lo and behold, you came up, said, this is the guy. And so I started reading all of your writings, your articles. And then I was like, oh, why don't I just reach out and see what happens? And I reached out, and you were kind enough to respond and go, sure, I'd love to do it. So thank you.
That's amazing. Great to be here.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that I'm coming up in the AI search.
Exactly. That's amazing. I love it. So, I mean, given your background, I'd love to know first and foremost, before we jump into questions about Rivalry and about competition, because there's so much I'd love our audience to learn. And admittedly, this is not an expertise of mine. It's something that I'm so interested in. So I'm sure that you've got so much information that you can provide to our audience. But before we do that, what got you interested in researching Rivalry specifically?
Yeah, happy to share that story. It actually goes all the way back to the time I was 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
So I spent 3rd and 4th grade living in a small town in France. And then my dad got a job at Penn State. He's also a business management professor, in fact. So we moved to State College, Pennsylvania, and my parents bought a house in a small neighborhood close to campus. Turns out that we were located across the street from the head coach of the football team, Joe Paterno. We knew very little about like American sports. Fast forward a couple months, it's like a late fall evening, Saturday night. There's this crazy commotion outside. And we step outside, and there's a gang of about 200 students carrying the goalposts from the football stadium. And they were attempting to plant those in Joe's yard. And Joe's not there. So his wife comes out, and she's like, hey, guys, this is great, but you should really take these back to the stadium. We wake up the next day and take a look at the newspaper. Front page story, Penn State had been on the road, and they defeated their top rival at the time, Notre Dame. Okay. In a tightly contested match. Notre Dame was ranked #1. The students back home in State College were so excited by this victory over a rival that they actually broke into the home stadium and tore out the goalposts, like carried them up to the edge of the stadium, tossed them over, collected them, walked them 2 miles to his house. And so this just stuck with me. It was like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. This competitive thing seems to be really powerful. As I continued to grow up, I got interested in sports and kind of organizing competitions with my friends. Then I got to grad school and was just thinking about what do I want to study here with respect to human psychology and organizational behavior. And competition was the first thing that came to my mind.
Wow.
And I started exploring that literature, and it was frankly a little dry. Yeah. There was no mention of rivalry. It was all about what are the stakes if you win. The educational psychology literature was saying, well, it's not a good idea to pit students against each other for grades, which I actually agree with. Yeah. But there was no mention of this like heightened level of competition that's encapsulated with rivalry that people in business and sports just know so well to be true.
Yeah, and it goes back so. I mean, you think when we talked about Coke and Pepsi, we talked about Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. This goes back in sports and in business so long. It's interesting that there wasn't a lot of rich content and writing on how these things positively and negatively affect these people and these organizations. It's amazing.
Exactly. And so, to be honest, it's kind of lucky for me because I've been able to build a career on this stream of research. But I think without getting into the details too much, a lot of business scholarship is dominated by economics, which is a much more rational way of thinking about human psychology. Yeah. And so, whereas rivalry is much more emotionally driven.
Sure.
So that's partly, I think, why it hadn't been studied.
Yeah, and I mean, when I was starting to do a deep dive and research it, there's so many applications to real estate, especially in a competitive market like New York City. And we do see agent rivalries. We see developers who are rivals. And I see it all the time, how emotional it becomes and how it changes the rationality of the decision-making. And we talk about game theory and things like that, the choices that are made, it changes those decisions. It changes those outcomes based on all the emotion and the fuel, the emotional fuel that's in there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the real estate industry is not one that I know that well, but it feels like absolutely a context in which rivalry is rife.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into the questions here. Well, that was just a primer. Now we're going to get into the actual questions. So your work reframes competition as relational rather than purely situational. So why does adding history between competitors fundamentally change the nature of decision making?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's kind of the big theoretical contribution that I see with this work, is making the case that not everyone is just thinking about the current moment. If there's a big prize to be won in a competition, yes, you want to win that prize. But when you encounter someone that you have a past history of competition with, it can really just change. And we see examples of this all the time. People being very motivated in a competitive setting, even if there's nothing valuable from a financial standpoint to win. There was an example when Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi had a charity exhibition match like 10 years after they had both retired, and it got really heated. And there's nothing really at stake there. So this is why it matters. We are emotional beings with histories and relationships, and those things just influence us very strongly.
Yeah, I think you said like when there's very little at stake. We see this in sports competitions all the time where, it was the Pro Bowl is now a flag football game, and these guys are out there. Some of them are getting very, very competitive. And if there is that natural rival across the field from them, somebody, you talk about repetitive, they see them frequently, or they've developed this rivalry over time. And even in a game of flag football, you can see it come out. It's amazing. I experienced that growing up myself in sports. I mean, my brother and I were huge rivals, and it didn't matter what was at stake. It wasn't about what we were going to win or lose.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, and you identify similarity, evenly matched competition, and repeated competition as drivers of rivalry. Can you tell us more about those drivers and how they came into your research?
Sure. Yeah. So this is work with my advisors back at UC Berkeley in grad school, and those three really emerged from reviewing the research literature at the time, but also just thinking about famous examples of rivals and teams and individuals as the three prevailing factors that drive the formation of a rivalry. Because, where do these come from? And so with respect to similarity, quickly, we are just naturally inclined to compare ourselves to people who are more similar, because those others feel like a natural point of comparison. Oh, they grew up, they have the same background as me, the same training, similar age. I should be able to outperform them. And then repeated competition, just you keep seeing this person again and again. And at first you feel fairly mildly towards them, but then it's like, oh man, and you keep associating them with the motivation of trying to win. That becomes something bigger. And the next time you see them, all of that past comes to mind. This is no longer just a one-shot contest. This is like the next chapter in an evolving story of competition. And there's this expectation of a future with one's rivals as well. So, and then narrowly matched contests just stick with us. If especially if you just barely lose, you can keep thinking of all the ways that might have gone differently. It's very hard to get over, and it just fuels the fire. And so those are the three things that seem to really promote rivalry between people.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you about this. Personally, I grew up as a undersized, under-talented athlete, but I was highly driven as an athlete. I wanted to be as good as all of my friends who were naturally great athletes. And I counted them as rivals. So does this happen where someone who is not necessarily, they position themselves as well-matched or as similar, so that like I knew that if I could try to even get close to compete with this person or this person, that it would make me a better athlete. Is that something that you see happen frequently?
Yeah, I love that. This is like strategic rivalry, right? So when people who really are in tune with their motivational triggers, athletes especially, think about sometimes they are strategic in who they select as a rival or who they try to form a rivalry with. And if you're selecting someone who's if they're way out of your league, that's unlikely to happen because you're kind of just deluding yourself at that point. And you're not getting any rivalry back from them. And so it may be hard to sustain that. But if they're a bit better than you and you can realistically imagine getting to that level,
Yeah.
then choosing them as a rival can be really highly motivating. I think we see examples of this in business too, where companies like Samsung, I would say, created a rivalry with Apple, as partly as a way of just getting more public attention, but also that can be really motivating for their workforce to rise to that level.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you make that comparison, and now all of a sudden it's, I love that, the fact that there has to be some realistic competition there, or that they have to be in somewhat the same sphere, but it does rise. It makes people think, okay, if we can be that, if we can compete with that, what does that say about us? And all of a sudden your brand and the feeling that you feel about who you are as a company and as an organization elevates, because you have in your mind that that's elevated as well.
That's right.
And that happens we see this in real estate. And in fact, as a coach, I encourage this idea of looking up to other real estate professionals who you like, the kind of business they do, the type of business they do, the way they conduct themselves, and the business that they've built. And you look toward that and say, can I form or develop a rivalry with that person that will elevate the way that I perform? Yeah. All right. So, and now, do people consciously recognize these past interactions influencing them, or are rivalries happening below awareness?
I think a lot of it is pretty automatic processing. So we ran one study that was really fun, where we flew a research team down to the University of Arizona.
Okay.
And they have a really fierce rivalry with Arizona State.
Right.
This is one of those experiments where you're kind of hiding the true nature of the study from the participants. So basically the way this worked is students from Arizona would come into the lab and we'd say, welcome, we're going to have you competing against someone today. And then that person would walk in.
With like an ASU t-shirt on or something?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So in one condition, it was the non-rival condition, because we need something to compare to. They were wearing University of Colorado colors. It was they were in the same conference at the time, but like Colorado just joined, so it's like a non-rival competitor. But then in the rival condition, person walks in, they are a recent graduate from Arizona State, like a first-year grad student, wearing all the gear, and immediately we saw heart rate. We were measuring like physiology here.
Yeah.
So the heart rate go up, and then those folks were taking much higher levels of risk in their competitions against that person. Now, I don't think they're going through the whole thought process of like, oh, this is the rich history or whatever. It's like an immediate response.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh. I love that. And it's funny, my wife grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, but her father was a University of Florida grad, and mother went to grad school there as well. So they grew up as Gator fans in Seminole country. My wife hates garnet and gold to this day. She cannot, she won't wear it. She doesn't look at it. Yep. And she never played for one of those teams. It was just that she was such a big Gator fan. So, that's incredible. That's amazing. The fact that it just happens, like that the heart rate goes up and that, that's incredible. All right. So from a standpoint, from the negotiation standpoint, I want to kind of change this to, or bring this into negotiation.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know there's some overlap, and especially with what you teach at NYU Stern School. So from a negotiation standpoint, what happens when someone becomes more focused on beating the other side than creating value for their client?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I, just published a paper on this recently, where I've always wanted to connect my interest in rivalry to my passion and interest in negotiation. And this project finally did that. And we're doing that here today, which I love. Yeah. So what we thought would be a really interesting situation to examine is what happens when you're negotiating with someone, but you suspect that they're also considering making a deal with your rival. And how might that change your approach to negotiation? Yeah. And as you kind of previewed, it flips people's goals on their head. So typically we come into a negotiation, primary goal is to get a good deal. Right. As I'm sure you espouse, we want win-wins as well. We want to protect and enhance the relationship, all of that. But like getting a good deal is going to be one of your primary goals.
Sure.
When you know that other person is considering saying yes to a rival instead of you, that changes completely. And so you actually become very willing to take a bad deal, to give up a lot more, because that means you're stealing away a deal from the rival. So that desire to beat them overcomes, really like pushes aside the more rational goals that people typically have.
And that's, obviously, as negotiators on behalf of clients, that's incredibly dangerous. And we see this in our deals more frequently than you would imagine. I mean, when we have a highest and best, we have a multiple bidding scenario. This is one of those situations where we see things like that come out. And oftentimes, if there's 7, 8, 9 bidders, agents will know who whether it's somebody in their office or somebody from another firm, who is involved, who's bidding. You know, it's a pretty tight inventory. So you've got a $2 million client looking in Park Slope. There's 3 options, and you're all going to be bidding on this. And so you see this come out with negotiators, real estate professionals, and how they communicate what winning looks like for their client. What does it mean? What is their reservation point? And are you actually looking at what your client's BATNA is, what alternative they have, what their walkaway point is, or are you just trying to get them to put together the best possible deal that will beat the other agent that is also competing for this apartment? And we see this happen all the time.
I love that. That's so interesting.
Yeah. Well, okay, we're going to take a break, and we're going to be right back with Gavin Kilduff after this message.
I'm Brian Scott Cohen, one of the top loan originators in the country, and the #1 mortgage originator at Guaranteed Rate Infinity. Guaranteed Rate Infinity arguably has the most advanced tech in the industry. Our completely digital loan process makes it easy and efficient for homeowners, from a 15-minute pre-approval to the digital application and through closing. My team and I would love to help you get into the home of your dreams.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. We work with Brown Harris Stevens and many other top real estate firms, staging their homes to sell quickly and at the highest price possible. Our staging is affordable without sacrificing quality or design. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
All right, and we are back. So, Gavin, you also demonstrate Rivalry can improve performance. So what's happening that makes people more focused and more driven?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's probably the single biggest consequence of Rivalry is it makes us more motivated to win, which can translate in more effort, more performance. And so that could be training, that could be preparing for a big negotiation, and that can also be execution in a game or during a negotiation. I've got a lot of data to speak to this. Just one example study looked at long distance running, and we were able to identify pairs of runners who were rivals based upon their past history of running the same races in similar times together. And then looking forward, we showed that when a runner's rival shows up at the race, they run an estimated 5 seconds per kilometer faster, so like a 25-second faster 5K than if that rival took the day off. So it could be a really powerfully motivating force. I like to think of it as like a goal that's always there. And we know the power of goal setting from decades of psychology. And so athletes, I think, as we were talking about earlier, intuitively know this. They understand that Rivalry can really push them to greater heights. And if you look at people like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, or Nadal and Federer, they often reflect on how they pushed each other to these greater heights. So it can be highly motivating, and that can translate into performance.
I love that. In terms of running, I want to go back to that for a second. Did you see in the research or did you observe how do rivals run with each other? Is there any sort of strategy that they employ? Like they want to be right next to each other until that last final sprint, or one might sit back and give the other one the idea that they might be winning when they know they're just kind of sitting back a couple of seconds behind them. Is there anything like that in the research? That's really fascinating.
I love that too. There's a lot of gamespersonship that goes on with these races. The analysis was really just with the race data, like the results, the numbers. So I could just speak anecdotally. Lots of runners have come up to me and said like, oh, this is so true. I've got my rival. I look at their race results in the newspaper or online like every week, even if I didn't run. And then absolutely, they look out for each other in the race, but I think they don't want to like pay too much attention. It's kind of like it's like a low key rivalry. I'm not that motivated, but then if you have the opportunity to pass them at the last moment, Like that's the way to do it.
I love it. I love it. Okay. And your research clearly shows that, as we just talked about, rivalries can elevate performance. And, you talked about examples of this, and I'm sure that our audience can all think of examples in their own personal life where that's true. But under what conditions does rivalry start to work against us and actually harm performance?
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword. It really is. That's how I've come to think of it. We spoke a bit about already the particular negotiation situation in which if you think your rival is also trying to get a deal done with your counterpart, that changes things. But even stepping outside of that, my research has shown that because people really want to beat their rivals, it can lead to things like excessive risk-taking and potentially even like deceptive or unethical behavior. And ethics and negotiations is a big topic, but it's very risky. And so you want to be careful about giving in to that motivation to do whatever it takes to try to defeat a rival.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the great overlaps of this content and real estate, because I think that there are many situations where agents get into, whether it's a rivalry or whether it's desperation or whatever it is that starts to cloud their judgment, they start to rationalize bad decisions or rationalize unethical decisions as something that makes sense just this one time. Right now, I think it's okay. I know overall I don't, but right now I can justify it. And a rivalry seems like that prime example of where you're in front of that person and you just kind of like step out of your ethical self and you just start to do whatever, the ends justify the means, so to speak.
For sure. Yeah. Totally see that.
So we've talked about the good and the bad. So what would make for the most healthy type of rivalry?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one I've been thinking a lot about recently, given that this is a double-edged sword. I think I would just highlight that rivalry is really a multifaceted relationship. Like, yes, you really want to beat them, but there's also this unique bond that rivals can come to feel with one another. They have a rich shared history. In many cases, they've pushed each other to like greater heights of motivation and performance that they ever thought were possible. And so you can come to really respect your rival.
Yeah.
And that's a situation in which it can be very healthy for both parties.
Yeah.
I think, even like consumer brands can benefit from their joint rivalries together, as can individuals. And so I've started to explore, what are the triggers of healthy versus harmful rivalry? And I think one of them is you need to feel like you have a fair chance to win. Right. So that this is not a threatening situation. Instead, it's a challenging situation. So those are two different physiological states that a lot of folks have researched when you're giving, a public performance or taking an exam or going into a big negotiation. You can think to yourself, oh, this is a challenge that I'm going to rise to. Yeah. Or you can feel, oh no, this is a threat and I don't know if I can quite do this. And one of the things that makes something more threatening is if it feels unfair, unpredictable, unwinnable. And so those are all things that can make a rivalry, go in the more harmful direction.
I love that. And, you talked about Magic and Larry Bird, things like that. Do you see that these big rivalries, the ones that we're all aware of, many of us are aware of, that lasted for years and years and years, and friendships came out of them?
Right.
Do you see that? Is it more common that friendships will develop after the rivalry is over, or do you see a lot of rivalry? Is it kind of taboo, or is it kind of like not good to make friends with your rival while you're still a rival?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I don't have like detailed research on that, but I've just thought a lot about it, and my intuition is aligned with yours, which is that there's kind of a process that these relationships go through over time. Like you start as competitors.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm seeing you for the first time. We're obviously not rivals yet. Then I see you a second, third, fourth, fifth time, and I'm like, man, it's that person again. And now I'm starting to feel a bit of rivalry. And I think it's purely competitive at that point.
Yeah.
But now we have rivalry. We come together and we have like this extraordinarily competitive, like high performance competition. It's like, wow, that was just like blew me away. And then I'm starting to feel a bit of connection, a bit of respect for you. So it's like over time. So I think Magic and Bird, for example, really didn't like each other during the first few years of their career.
Right.
And then that shifted. And then they became to really respect each other and appreciate one another. And so I think it can happen while you're still competing.
Yeah.
You don't have to be past the competitive phase for this respect to emerge. Can you be friends with a rival? It partly depends upon how much other people are watching you. So if it's like an intense sport like fighting, like let's say UFC, and the fans expect you to be ruthless with each other,
right? Yeah,
it's going to be hard if they see you like going out to dinner together or hugging each other. And I think basketball has actually gone through an evolution where, like in the 80s and 90s, when I grew up watching basketball, it was really frowned upon to fraternize with the enemy, as they would call it.
Right.
But now I think that's a little more acceptable. So there's not one model of this, but I think it's really fascinating to explore the different types and phases of the relationship.
Yeah, and I think as a fan, or as somebody, as an observer, as I get older, I have a much better appreciation for those rivalries where they do have that mutual respect and almost that, or a friendship, or at least almost a friendship, where where they're in public appearances speaking well about the other person. And I think as I get older, I have an appreciation, as opposed to that rah-rah team thing where it's like, no, that you can't say anything good about the other side. I mean, growing up, I was a Vikings fan. We couldn't say anything good about the Packers. So it was absolutely frowned upon. But as you get older and you start to see how those rivalries develop, you start to appreciate the fact that they actually can have a mutual level of respect for each other and still get on the court or get on the field and look across at that other person, and they're ready for battle, or they're ready to compete at the highest level. It's fun to watch.
Exactly. Yeah. And if we were to link this back to negotiation again, I think with a rival, there's a potential there. Like you can trigger their most competitive side, or you could try to appeal to the fact that we have shared all these amazing experiences. And in negotiation, as you and all the listeners know, like it's a mixed motive situation. There's some competitive elements, there's some cooperative elements. And so you can shift the mode of negotiation that's happening. It's not a race where one of us has to win and one of us has to lose. And so I think rivalry is actually even more fascinating in the negotiation context, because rivals, because they know each other so well, because they may respect one another, might actually be able to get to a point where they're even better at integrative negotiation, if they can shift their mindset into that way. I
love that. And that's a perfect way to wrap in this conversation, because I love that idea that these integrative negotiations can actually, more value can be created out of them by two rivals who, if it's that healthy rivalry that you're talking about, they can actually create more value in a negotiation. I love that. That's great.
I think it's certainly possible. It may not be what normally happens
right, exactly.
When you get two rivals together, but I think the potential is there.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. So I'm going to ask you a quick question in our lightning round. But first, so we're going to transition over to the lightning round. I got to cue the lightning round theme music. All right. So quick lightning round with Gavin. All right. So on the subject of rivalry, very quick, does rivalry increase risk taking?
Yes, that I've shown, like empirically, it increases heart rate, it increases the desire to like get the best possible, and that leads people to kind of ignore the potential downsides and just shoot for the absolute best.
All right, and that's, I mean, I think that's one of the huge takeaways I think from this enhanced level of competition into rivalry. That it can lead to better outcomes, but oftentimes we know that a lot of times better outcomes come from taking on a little bit more risk. And that's amazing. All right. So, and we mentioned in your introduction that you love to travel, climb, and hike. So given your choice, where in the world are you and what terrain are you hiking or climbing?
I'm going to go with Patagonia. I've not actually been yet, but I've just heard incredible things about it. I was lucky enough to travel to New Zealand about a year ago.
Oh, wow.
So those are kind of the two hiking bucket list items for me. So
nice.
Hoping to get down to Patagonia maybe in January, February next year.
Love it. And follow up, when you hike, is your rival there with you?
Not normally. Funny you ask, my rival is probably my oldest friend.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
that's cool. That's great.
Exactly. Because we grew up competing together. And so if I see him across the table from me, if we're playing ping pong or on the basketball court, or if we're hiking together, we're definitely going to be pushing each other harder. But we're going to be enjoying every step of the way.
Oh, amazing. Gavin, I'm so glad that you responded to me, that you came on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. If you would tell our audience where can they find you if they want to reach out and learn more about what you're researching and what you're teaching at NYU. How can they reach out and find you?
Yeah, well, thank you, Eirik, for having me. It's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed it. LinkedIn is probably the best option for folks. I do have a NYU Stern web page, of course, but I'm more active on LinkedIn with the latest research that I'm up to. Folks could look me up and send me an email. We're actually looking for corporate partners who might be interested in studying some of the team dynamics type research that I do within their corporate teams. So if any of your listeners may find that interesting, we're looking at how quick icebreakers for teams can increase the psychological safety within those teams and then lead to higher performance over time. So yeah, welcome people to reach out.
I would encourage anybody in the real estate community, if that's there's so many, the team dynamic in real estate is really a fascinating topic. So if you're an organization, a developer, or a company in real estate, and you want to reach out to Gavin, that'd probably be a great company for you to have it in your study.
That'd be amazing. And if we want to run a study of rivalry between real estate agents, I'm up for that too.
All right, I love it. All right, so let's get our key takeaways here. And what Gavin's work shows us is that competition is not just about the situation, it's about the relationship. And when you introduce history and repeated interaction, competition doesn't just stay neutral. It often becomes a rivalry, and rivalries change how we think, how we feel, and ultimately how we behave in competition. Now, that's not inherently a bad thing. Rivalries can elevate us. It can push us to prepare more, focus more, and operate at a higher level. It can sharpen our execution and raise our standards, and in many ways, it can bring out our best. But it also has a downside. And it's not because rivalry itself is the problem. It's because we often are unaware of when it starts to influence us in ways that cloud our judgment. So the next time that you think about a deal, the next time you're in a deal, in your next conversation, your next negotiation, here's some things to take with you. First, lean into the right kind of rivalry, that kind of frenemy conversation or that frenemy idea that Gavin was talking about, that healthy rivalry. The right competitor sharpens your thinking and brings out your best. So don't avoid rivalry. Seek out the kind that challenges you, that forces you to improve, and that keeps you operating at a higher level. Second, stay grounded in curiosity. And this is where rivalry can start to work against us. It has a tendency to replace questions with assumptions and turn neutral actions into perceived threats, as Gavin talked about. Great negotiators resist that pull. They slow the moment down, ask better questions, and stay open to information that leads to better decisions and better outcomes. And third, stay aligned with your role. Rivalry can make things feel personal. And when that happens, it's easy to slip into trying to win for yourself instead of negotiating on behalf of your client. So stay clear on why you're there. The goal is not to beat the other side. The goal is to create the best possible outcome for the people we represent. And that's Shear Line, everyone. As a reminder, you can support this show by following us, subscribing, rating, and reviewing the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just go to getmorenetwork.com. And there you can check out all of the amazing shows on the network, including past episodes of Shear Line. You can follow me all over Instagram at archway.partners, as well as on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Eirik the Expert. You can contact the Excelsior team at BHS by going to bhsusa.com. And you can connect with my company, Archway Partners Coaching, by visiting archwaypartnersinc.com to learn more about all of the coaching and training opportunities we are providing, including our new Archway Partners experience platform, a growing community of agents with access to hours of content, including videos, courses, modules, scripts, and tools, as well as a weekly live small group coaching event with me on the network. So remember, everybody, as we depart, there is a key for every lock, but it's the right combination of grooves, cuts, and teeth that lifts the pins and creates the shear line. Until next time, keep turning curiosity into connection, mystery into mastery, and keep unlocking what's possible. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next time.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business, and it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table. And emotion, too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.